Chapter 3, Section 2, Egypt's Powerful Kings and Queens. What would it be like to have total power over the lives of people? Very few leaders today have such sweeping powers, but at one time, kings and queens had the power of life and death over their people. How would it feel to be responsible for the well-being of thousands of subjects who looked upon you as a god? Questions to think about throughout this section. How did Egyptian rulers unify their country? And 2, what were some of the accomplishments of Egypt's greatest pharaohs? Key terms that will be defined for you through your Google Classroom: pharaoh, dynasty, and regent. Key people to pay attention for: Hatshepsut, Menes, and Thutmose III. Make sure to have your notes available as this video plays through or as you're reading the textbook. Make sure to submit your notes through the Google Classroom as homework when you are finished. The statue you see here looks like the face of a powerful king of ancient Egypt, and indeed it is, but there's something wrong with this face. You see, there's a woman behind this beard. The woman is Hatshepsut, who ruled Egypt during the New Kingdom. Hatshepsut was a bold leader who led her army into battle when enemies threatened Egypt's borders. But she is most known for creating a time of great peace and economic success. She encouraged trade with faraway places, sending a famous expedition to the land of Punt on the east coast of Africa. Egyptian traders returned with shiploads of ivory, gold, and spices. Hatshepsut was not the only woman to rule Egypt, but the respected title of pharaoh or king traditionally referred to a man. For this reason, Hatshepsut appears here with the clothing and symbols of a pharaoh, beard, and all. Egypt's god kings. Hatshepsut was one of many famous Egyptian pharaohs to rule Egypt. Some, like her, were wise. Others were careless or cruel. Egypt's fortunes rested on the strengths of its pharaohs. From dynasty to dynasty. The history of ancient Egypt is the history of each of its dynasty. A dynasty is a series of rulers from the same family. Egypt had 31 dynasties until it was conquered by the Greek ruler Alexander the Great in 332 BCE. Historians group Egypt's dynasties into 3 main time periods called kingdoms. The earliest time period is called the Old Kingdom. The next came the Middle Kingdom. The latest time period is known as the New Kingdom. The timeline you see here shows the dates of each kingdom. Remember, these kingdoms are not places. They are time periods. The gaps between the kingdoms were times of troubles, wars, invasions, weak rulers. These in-between periods were rare, however. For most ancient Egyptian history, there was stable rule. According to legend, Egypt's first dynasty began when a king named Menes united Upper and Lower Egypt. Menes built a city named Memphis near the present-day city of Cairo. And there's Memphis. From there, he ruled over the 2 lands, which is what the ancient Egyptians called Upper and Lower Egypt. Carvings from Menes' times show the pharaoh wearing 2 crowns, the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt. The uniting of Egypt began one of the most stable civilizations in history. It lasted for more than 2,500 years. All-powerful pharaohs. The pharaohs had absolute power over their people. Whatever the pharaoh decided became law. He decided when the fields would be planted. He received crops from the workers on his estates. The pharaoh was also a religious leader. It was the pharaoh, Egyptians believed, who provided his people with the Nile's yearly floods and the harvests that followed. As one official wrote,
"He is the god Re, whose beams enable us to see. He gives more light to the 2 lands than the sun's disk. He makes the earth more green than the Nile in flood. He has filled the 2 lands with strength and life.
2,000 years of power. Egypt grew and prospered during its first 6 dynasties, which included the Old Kingdom. It was blessed with able rulers and a well-run system of government. The pharaohs kept the peace and trade with Nubia, with only occasional conflicts. They sent merchants to the eastern coast of the Mediterranean to find timber. This timber was used in the building of houses, boats, and furniture. Egyptian merchants may have even traveled north across the Mediterranean in search of trade items. About 2250 BCE, near the end of the Old Kingdom, governors in the provinces began to challenge the power of the pharaoh's government. Egypt's unity crumbled, and the dynasties grew weak. The early dynasties of the Middle Kingdom restored order and reunited the country. With calmer times, the pharaohs spent the nation's wealth on works such as irrigation projects instead of on wars. They also built a canal between the Nile and the Red Sea. Egypt grew even richer. However, less able rulers followed. In time, they lost control of the country to foreign invaders. Egyptian princes became strong enough to drive out foreign invaders around 1550 BCE. This event marks the start of the New Kingdom. The first pharaohs of the New Kingdom were not content just to drive foreigners out of their country. They wanted to build an empire. The pharaohs created huge armies of foot soldiers, mounted warriors, and war chariots. Bronze swords and body armor made Egyptians nearly unbeatable. A powerful queen, a great pharaoh. Around 1500 BC, a child named Thutmose III became pharaoh. Because of his youth, his stepmother was appointed regent. A regent is someone who rules for a child until the child is old enough to rule. His stepmother was Hatshepsut, whom we heard about earlier in this video, and who we see here with Thutmose III. However, Hatshepsut was not content to be regent. Hatshepsut had herself proclaimed pharaoh. She ruled Egypt for about 22 years. Hatshepsut's reign was good for Egypt. She apparently enjoyed her power too, because when Thutmose III grew up, she refused to yield the throne to him. He took over when she died and had all of her statues destroyed. We don't know if Thutmose had a hand in Hatshepsut's death. Here you can see Queen Hatshepsut's temple at the foot of a dramatic limestone cliff in Deir al-Bahari, Egypt. It is one of the masterpieces of the New Kingdom's architecture. Thutmose III was one of the greatest pharaohs of the New Kingdom. He led his army in wars against Syria and Phoenicia in Southwest Asia. Egyptian troops advanced as far east as the Euphrates River and south into Nubia. Yet Thutmose was more than a conqueror. He was an educated man who loved to study plants. Unlike most rulers of his time, he treated defeated peoples with mercy. The New Kingdom began to decline around 1075 BCE. Civil war left Egypt weak and poorly defended. The mighty kingdom fell to the famous conqueror Alexander the Great in about 332 BCE. About 300 years later, Egypt was conquered by another powerful civilization of the ancient world, the Romans. Egypt became part of the Roman Empire then, and it would not govern itself again for almost 2,000 years. This is the end of the video and the end of section 2. At the end of this section, you should be able to not only answer the questions that go along with your notes that are your homework that you will make sure to submit through the Google Classroom, but also be able to answer these next questions. 1. How did Egypt's rulers govern their empire? 2. Describe some of the accomplishments of each of the 3 Egyptian kingdoms. And finally, explain why Egypt's rulers had more authority than most rulers have today. Once you have finished thinking about those questions and have come up with your answers, make sure you have completed your notes and submitted your homework through the Google Classroom, and we'll see you in class tomorrow.